54 stretches through the heart of Otero County, New Mexico, like a black ribbon baked into the desert floor. Out here, the heat shimmers on the asphalt, blurring the horizon. It is a place where people drive to get somewhere else. Nobody stops on Route 54 unless they have to. But at 2 p.m. on a blistering Thursday in July, a state trooper noticed an 18-wheeler parked on the gravel shoulder of a desolate stretch of highway. The hazard lights were blinking, cutting through the thick, heavy heat. The massive diesel engine was still idling, creating a low, rhythmic rumble that vibrated in the trooper's chest as he approached. He expected to find a driver asleep at the wheel, or perhaps someone dealing with a blown radiator. But as he stepped up to the massive chrome grille and looked up at the cab, he noticed something profoundly unsettling. The driver's side door was closed, but sitting perfectly side by side on the gravel, positioned precisely beneath the metal step of the cab, was a pair of well-worn steel-toed boots. They were neatly aligned, as if the driver had taken them off, stepped out onto the burning sharp gravel in his socks, and simply walked away into the endless expanse of the Chihuahuan desert. The trooper climbed onto the metal step and peered through the driver's window. The air conditioning was blasting. A half-drank cup of coffee sat in the cup holder. A cell phone was resting on the passenger seat, connected to a charging cable. The driver was gone, and within 48 hours, the search for the man who left his boots on the side of the highway would unravel one of the most calculated, cold-blooded mysteries in New Mexico history. Chapter 1: The Weight of the World. To understand why a long-haul trucker would seemingly abandon his rig in the middle of a desert, investigators first had to understand the man behind the wheel. His name was Tommy Gallagher. He was 28 years old, broad-shouldered, and had a smile that could disarm a room in seconds. Tommy was not a transient wanderer. He was a man carrying the weight of his family on his back. His younger sister Lily had been diagnosed with a severe neurological condition 2 years prior. The medical bills had nearly bankrupted their parents. Tommy dropped out of college, got his commercial driver's license, and started driving cross-country to keep his family afloat. He drove grueling hours. He took the routes nobody else wanted. He lived on truck stop coffee, minimal sleep, and the singular goal of seeing his sister smile when he came home to El Paso. His fiancée, a high school teacher named Emily, described Tommy as fiercely dependable. He never missed a check-in call. Whenever he crossed a state line, he would send her a text message. He was meticulous about his safety, his schedule, and his equipment. He would never, under any circumstances, leave his truck unattended. And he certainly would never leave his boots in the dirt. On the morning of July 14th, Tommy picked up a load in Albuquerque. According to the shipping manifest, he was hauling 40,000 pounds of industrial agricultural equipment, bound for a distribution center in West Texas. He kissed Emily goodbye at 4 a.m., climbed into the cab of his Peterbilt, and drove south. He sent his standard text message at 8 a.m., passing through Socorro. "Love you." It was the last message Tommy Gallagher would ever send. Chapter 2: The Silent Cab. When the New Mexico State Police officially declared Tommy a missing person, they treated the abandoned 18-wheeler as a crime scene. Crime scene technicians descended on the gravel shoulder of Route 54. The interior of a long-haul truck is essentially a small apartment. Tommy's cab was impeccably clean. His logbook was sitting on the dashboard. His wallet, containing $400 in cash and all his credit cards, was tucked inside his duffel bag on the sleeper bunk. The keys were still in the ignition, keeping the engine running and the air conditioning on. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood, just the eerie, chilling presence of those steel-toed boots on the gravel outside. Investigators brought in tracking dogs. The hounds sniffed the boots, circled the truck, and then sat down directly at the edge of the pavement. They didn't track Tommy's scent out into the desert brush. The scent ended on the asphalt. This told detectives a terrifying story. Tommy hadn't wandered off into the heat. He had been placed into another vehicle. Whether he stepped into that vehicle willingly or was forced remained the absolute center of the mystery. Chapter 3: The Freight Contradiction. If Tommy's disappearance wasn't a random robbery, investigators had to look at what he was hauling. Cargo theft is a massive multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise in the Southwest. Criminals will frequently hijack trucks, dump the drivers, and steal the freight. Detectives walked to the back of the massive 53-foot trailer. The heavy steel padlock on the rear doors was completely intact. It hadn't been tampered with or cut. The bolt seal, which ensures the cargo hasn't been opened during transit, matched the serial number on Tommy's manifest. Using heavy bolt cutters, police snapped the seal and swung the heavy doors open. They expected to find 40,000 pounds of valuable agricultural equipment. Or if this was a hijacking, they expected to find the trailer completely empty. Instead, they found something that made absolutely no sense. The trailer was filled to the brim with pallets of cheap, low-grade potting soil, the kind you buy for $2 a bag at a hardware store. The entire load was virtually worthless. The shipping manifest was a complete fabrication. Tommy's employer, a mid-sized logistics company called Apex Freight, had provided forged paperwork. Tommy wasn't hauling valuable machinery. He was hauling a decoy. Why would a trucking company forge a manifest for dirt? And more importantly, did Tommy know what was actually in his trailer? Chapter 4: The Boss and the Decoy. Detectives immediately turned their attention to Apex Freight. The company was owned by a man named Victor Vance. Victor was a sharp, aggressive businessman who operated his fleet out of a dusty lot in Albuquerque. When investigators arrived at the Apex dispatch office, Victor appeared completely unbothered by the police presence. He sat behind a large mahogany desk, wearing a tailored suit that felt out of place in a trucking yard. When detectives asked him about the forged manifest, Victor didn't even blink. He claimed it was a standard industry practice. He said Apex had recently suffered a string of cargo thefts. To throw off the thieves, Victor claimed he occasionally sent trucks out with fake manifests and worthless cargo hoping to bait the hijackers. He insisted Tommy was fully aware of the decoy run and had volunteered for it. Tommy was a good kid, Victor said, leaning back in his leather chair. If somebody hijacked him thinking he had the real cargo, that's a tragedy. But it's an occupational hazard. The alibi was smooth. It was plausible. But it lacked empathy. Victor spoke about Tommy as if he were a lost piece of inventory, not a human being. Detectives subpoenaed Victor's phone records and the company's financial ledgers. They needed to prove if Victor was a grieving boss or a mastermind. But Victor had an ironclad alibi for July 14th. He had been attending a transportation conference in Las Vegas, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, when Tommy's truck was abandoned in New Mexico. If Victor Vance was involved, he didn't pull the trigger. He had someone else do it. Chapter 5. The co-driver's secret. Investigators shifted their focus to the other drivers at Apex Freight. Long-haul trucking is a solitary life, but the drivers talk. They communicate on CB radios. They share meals at truck stops. They know each other's secrets. Detectives began interviewing Tommy's closest friend at the company, a veteran driver named Leo Ramirez. Leo was deeply shaken by Tommy's disappearance. He sat in the interrogation room, twisting a baseball cap in his weathered hands. Leo told detectives that Tommy had been acting strangely for the past month. Tommy was normally a rule follower, but he had started pulling his truck off the main highways, taking rural back roads that added hours to his routes. When Leo asked him about it, Tommy had been evasive. But then Leo revealed a piece of information that blew the case wide open. 3 days before Tommy vanished, he had called Leo in the middle of the night. Tommy was frantic. "He told me to check my air brakes," Leo said, his voice trembling. He said, "Leo, they're tampering with the rigs. They're making us carry things we don't know about. Check your secondary compartments." Secondary compartments. Long-haul trucks are massive machines filled with hidden voids, toolboxes, and access panels. If Tommy wasn't killed for the cargo in the trailer, was he killed for what was hidden inside the cab itself? Detectives rushed back to the police impound lot where Tommy's Peterbilt was being held. They brought specialized mechanics to tear the truck apart. They checked the sleeper berth. They checked the air deflectors. They checked the dual fuel tanks. Behind the passenger side fuel tank, tucked into a narrow custom-built steel compartment that was completely invisible from a casual inspection, investigators found it. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't cash. It was a collection of tightly wrapped, vacuum-sealed packages containing hundreds of unregistered, untraceable ghost gun components. Apex Freight wasn't just hauling agricultural supplies. They were a rolling distribution network for illegal firearms. And Tommy Gallagher, the honest kid trying to save his sister, had figured it out. Chapter 6. The Electronic Witness. The investigation was now a federal arms trafficking case. But detectives still needed to find out what happened to Tommy on Route 54. They needed to know who intercepted him. They turned to the truck's ELD, the electronic logging device. By law, every commercial truck is equipped with a digital tracker that monitors speed, location, and engine hours. The ELD data for Tommy's final route showed a completely uninterrupted drive. According to the log, Tommy left Albuquerque, drove at a steady 65 miles per hour, and finally pulled over on the shoulder of Route 54 at 1:15 p.m., where the truck remained until the trooper found it. The digital log suggested Tommy pulled over voluntarily, but cyber forensics experts know that ELDs can be hacked. They can be manipulated by software installed at the dispatch center. To find the truth, investigators bypassed the ELD entirely. They accessed the ECM, the engine control module. The ECM is the true brain of a diesel truck. It cannot be altered remotely. It records hard braking events, transmission shifts, and engine torque with microscopic precision. When the cyber analyst downloaded the ECM data, it completely contradicted the official log. The engine module showed that Tommy did not drive uninterrupted to Route 54. At exactly 11:42 a.m., nearly 40 miles north of where the truck was found, the ECM recorded a catastrophic braking event. Tommy had slammed on the brakes so hard that the anti-lock system engaged on all 18 wheels. The truck came to a complete, violent stop. It idled for exactly 4 minutes. Then the transmission was shifted into first gear, and the truck slowly accelerated back onto the highway. Someone had forced Tommy off the road, 40 miles north. Someone had taken him out of the cab. And then, someone else had driven the truck to the desolate shoulder on Route 54, placed his boots outside the door and walked away, staging the scene to confuse investigators. Chapter 7. The Interception Point. Armed with the exact GPS coordinates of the hard-braking event, state police and FBI agents descended on a lonely stretch of Highway 285 40 miles north of the staged crime scene. This area was completely desolate. Nothing but sagebrush, red dirt, and endless sky. But the forensic evidence was still there, baked into the asphalt. Crime scene reconstruction experts found massive, thick, black skid marks on the pavement, perfectly matching the wheelbase of Tommy's truck. But right next to the skid marks, they found something else. Tire tracks belonging to a heavy-duty dually pickup truck. The tracks showed that the pickup had swerved aggressively in front of the 18-wheeler, forcing it to a halt. Detectives searched the brush along the side of the highway. 50 yards into the desert, half buried in the sand, an agent found a shattered piece of black plastic. It was the casing to a specialized, encrypted two-way radio, the exact kind of radio used by private security firms, or in this case, by the enforcers working for Victor Vance. Chapter 8. The Dispatcher's Mistake. Victor Vance had an alibi for the day of the murder. He was in Las Vegas, but the cartel he was operating out of his trucking company required logistics. He needed someone to track Tommy, intercept him, and dispose of the evidence. Investigators subpoenaed the employment records of Apex Freight. They were looking for anyone on the payroll with a history of violence or specialized security training. They found a man named Marcus Kane. Marcus was officially listed as a route supervisor for Apex. His background file showed he was a former military contractor who had been dishonorably discharged. He drove a heavy-duty black dually pickup truck. Detectives needed Marcus's location data for July 14th. But Marcus was a professional. He didn't use a standard cell phone. He used burner phones that couldn't be tracked through conventional cell towers. However, Marcus made one incredibly mundane, profoundly arrogant mistake. He loved his truck, and his truck was equipped with a factory-installed infotainment system. Even though Marcus never paired his burner phone via Bluetooth, the truck's internal GPS navigation system was active. Cybercrime detectives obtained a warrant for the vehicle. They downloaded the navigation history from the truck's dashboard computer. The data was a roadmap to murder. On the morning of July 14th, Marcus's truck left Albuquerque. It drove south on Highway 285. It stopped at the exact coordinates of the skid marks at 11:42 a.m. And then the GPS showed the truck driving deep into the desert, stopping at an abandoned, collapsed silver mine 5 miles off the main road. Chapter 9. The Silver Mine. The recovery operation was agonizing. Search and rescue teams, accompanied by forensic anthropologists, navigated the treacherous dirt roads leading to the abandoned silver mine. The area was dangerously unstable. Old wooden beams held back tons of earth. but the tracking dogs immediately alerted to a freshly disturbed patch of rocky soil near the mine's entrance. It took 3 hours of meticulous, heartbreaking excavation. Beneath 4 feet of desert dirt, they found Tommy Gallagher. He was still wearing his socks. His hands had been bound with heavy industrial zip ties. The medical examiner later confirmed he had died from a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Tommy hadn't fought back because he believed cooperating might save his life. He just wanted to go home to his sister. But Marcus Kane, acting on orders from Victor Vance, was never going to let him walk away. Tommy had found the hidden compartment. He knew too much. Chapter 10: The Interrogation Room. With the body recovered and the GPS data secured, the FBI moved simultaneously. Victor Vance was arrested at a luxury restaurant in Albuquerque. Marcus Kane was apprehended at a gas station just miles from the Mexican border. They were placed in separate interrogation rooms at the federal building. The strategy was classic: the prisoner's dilemma. The first one to talk gets a deal. The one who stays silent goes down for the whole conspiracy. Victor Vance remained utterly silent. He demanded his attorney, leaned back in his chair, and stared blankly at the wall. He believed his money and his corporate shields would protect him. But Marcus Kane was a mercenary. Mercenaries possess zero loyalty when the paycheck stops. When investigators showed Marcus the GPS data from his own truck, placing him at the exact scene of the interception and the burial site, his stoic demeanor cracked. Marcus realized he was facing federal death penalty charges for kidnapping resulting in murder. He asked for a glass of water. He took a slow sip, and then he traded Victor Vance's life for his own. Marcus confessed that Victor had ordered the hit. Tommy had discovered the ghost guns while checking a fuel line and had confronted Victor the week before. Victor assured Tommy it was a one-time mistake and begged him to finish the week's routes. But Victor immediately dispatched Marcus to silence the young driver. Marcus explained the staging of the crime scene. He had pulled Tommy out of the rig on Highway 285. He forced another driver on Victor's payroll to take the 18-wheeler to Route 54 and leave the boots outside the door. The goal was to make it look like Tommy had suffered a mental breakdown or had wandered off into the desert and succumbed to the elements. A body lost in the desert is a tragedy. A body with a bullet hole is a homicide investigation. They wanted a mystery. Instead, they left a trail of digital breadcrumbs. Chapter 11: The Dashboard Camera. Marcus's confession was enough to secure indictments, but defense attorneys are notorious for attacking the credibility of a cooperating witness. Victor's lawyers argued that Marcus was a rogue employee, acting alone to steal the cargo, and was simply lying to save his own skin. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors needed hard, undeniable proof of Victor's involvement. They found it in the most unexpected place: Tommy Gallagher. Tommy was meticulous about his safety. He didn't just check his brakes. He protected his cab. When investigators had searched Tommy's sleeper berth, they had found nothing unusual. But during a final, microscopic review of the crime scene photos, a cyber analyst noticed a tiny black wire tucked behind the fabric lining of the ceiling. Tommy had purchased a secondary hidden dash cam. He hadn't wired it to the truck's main power supply. He had hardwired it to an independent battery pack hidden in the roof insulation. Because the killers didn't know it was there, they didn't take the SD card. Investigators extracted the tiny memory card and plugged it into a secure terminal. The video quality was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. The camera had been recording on a loop for a week. It captured the moment Tommy confronted Victor Vance in the dispatch yard 3 days before the murder. The recording was undeniable. Victor's voice echoed in the courtroom months later. "You drive the route, Tommy. You keep your mouth shut, or I promise you, I will send someone to visit that sick little sister of yours in El Paso. Do you understand me? You belong to me now." A collective gasp filled the courtroom when the tape was played. Victor Vance's eyes dropped to the floor. His high-priced defense attorney closed his notebook. The trial was effectively over. Chapter 12. A Mile Marker Memorial. Victor Vance was convicted of federal racketeering, arms trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus Kane, pursuant to his plea agreement, received 40 years. The logistics company was seized by the federal government, and its assets were liquidated. The resolution of the legal case brought justice. But for Emily and Lily, the pain of Tommy's absence remains a permanent fixture in their lives. Sniff. The money from a victim's compensation fund, combined with an immense outpouring of support from the trucking community, ensured that Lily's medical bills were paid in full. Tommy had saved his sister just as he had promised. But he paid the ultimate price to do it. Today, if you drive down Route 54 in Otero County, past the endless sagebrush and the shimmering heat, you will pass mile marker 112. There, on the gravel shoulder, is a small, quiet memorial. It is a simple wooden cross, and resting at the base of the cross is a pair of bronzed, steel-toed work boots. They serve as a reminder to every driver passing through the empty miles of the desert, a reminder of a young man who carried the weight of the world, who refused to look the other way, and who walked into the darkness so that his family could stay in the light.